Hello and welcome to episode 7. Christine, you wanted maps, so here you go. Episode 1 in this series saw us ride fine Spanish tarmac to Puebla de Sanabria, kip in their posh Parador, cross the border into Portugal the next day, ride to Braganca and hit the first dirt roads, heading south to Torre de Moncorvo. Episodes 2 to 5 reported on our adventures, overnighting at Mantigas, under canvas near Belva, getting ever hotter and glad to be finding ourselves in utter luxury at Mora, and finally to Monte Gordo, where we spent a couple of nights in order to have a day off, a spot of R&R and a dip in the Algarve's Atlantic waters. Episode 6 mixed tarmac and Murcian trans-European trail routes with overnights at Cordoba, Pozo Alcon and back under canvas at Moratala as we re-entered Spain and headed northeast. In this episode, we hit some great empty twisting tarmac roads, enabling our bigger bikes to really stretch their legs. We found overnight accommodation at UTL, Morella and once more under canvas at Berga before arriving for 2 nights in Cadaqués to prepare for what would hopefully prove to be the highlight of the trip, a largely dirt ride east to west on the Adventure Country Tracks route along the magnificent mountain wall of the Pyrenees that marks the border between Spain and France. After getting rather lost and going round in ever-decreasing circles during some nasty weather at or near Requena, we found a hostel at UTL, apparently being run single-handed by a gentleman who was also managing a bar and restaurant across the road. Patience was definitely required here, but all was okay. Civic pride was certainly not lacking with one local artist, and to be fair, our own less enthusiastic opinion of the place might have been coloured by what had been a rather trying day on the bikes. As is so often the case, however, a bad day gets followed by a very good one. After leaving UTL, we arrived at Morella, and arguably the best experience of this section of our journey. You know when you see one of those heavily fortified towns, built high on an impossibly steep rock and topped with a grand castle? Well, Morella is a great example, and we found a comfy old hotel right at its heart. The visit wasn't for the weak of ticker or short of breath, with access to anywhere in the town being via flight after flight of stone steps worn by the footfall of centuries of folk. Morella had certainly seen its fair share of action. Nearby prehistoric cave paintings, at over 7,000 years old, are the first known depictions of archery combat. The ancient Greeks once ran the town. They were chased out by Carthaginians, but nobody could pronounce their names, so they were eventually ousted by the Romans, who turned the town all very Roman in a programme of Romanisation. The Romans remained top dogs until the Visigoths came knocking, not once, but twice. When a Visigoth knocks twice, you know you're in trouble, and the Romans suffered a more serious run for their money than they could cope with. The Visigoths, however, were a bit subpar when it came to plumbing and personal hygiene, so in 714 the highly sophisticated and advanced Muslim Moors, no longer willing to tolerate the smell emanating from the mountain, captured Morella and ruled until the Spanish won it in a game of religious intolerance some 300 years later. Possibly due to the involvement of local pop sensation El Cid Vicious, it was recaptured by the Moors, only to be lost again to the Spanish in 1117, recaptured by the Moors once more, and finally regained by the Spanish in 1232. But Morella, despite by now being quite out of breath, wasn't done being a particularly scrap-happy part of history just yet. It was fought over during the Spanish War of Succession from 1701 to 1714, later lost to Napoleon, recaptured by Spain and then captured by General Franco's forces in 1938 near the end of the Spanish Civil War, only to be harried by Republican guerrillas who hung out in the surrounding mountains, making problems for the fascist dictator almost until the 1960s. Things seemed to have calmed down a bit by the time Nozza, myself and some democracy arrived, but we remained vigilant as we investigated Morella's spectacular Baroque church. Its ancient bull ring, and its repeatedly battle-scarred castle. Well worth the visit to a place that has seen action throughout the full sweep of known human history, but survived to show traces of almost every period from those turbulent centuries. The next day we headed off once more in a northeasterly direction, spent a stormy, lightning illuminated night under canvas at Berger Resort, the only real rip-off place we suffered on the whole trip. Hotel prices to pitch a tent indeed. And the day after that rode east for Cadaqués, our first sighting of the Mediterranean and our next proper rest hold. In Cadaqués we were beyond fortunate to secure a splendid two-storey, two-bedroom apartment for less than the price of most hotels. I'd visited this town many times before, and though tourism seemed to have overcome fishing as the economic mainstay, despite the popularity of former resident Salvador Dali waning somewhat since the days when he was the darling of the hippie community, the Mediterranean and Cadaqués locals were still as warm, welcoming, and in some cases pleasantly wacky as ever. The beers flowed and good food was everywhere, an excellent place to refresh ourselves before taking on the challenge of the Pyrenees, which we'll begin in the next episode. hope you enjoyed this brief catch-up and will join us again for episode 8. Yeah, if and when I ever get that together. As ever, thanks for watching, and do hit the like, subscribe and notification bell if you should feel so inclined. Bye for now.